In the year 370, while the Goths were further establishing their authority in the region between the Danube and the Black Sea, a terrifying threat appeared from the east that would entirely change the region. It was a nomadic tribe called the Huns that originated from the steppes of Central Asia and had started expanding rapidly westward. These fierce warriors were always on horseback, with bows and arrows as their main weapons. They first clashed with the Alans, another nomadic tribe, and then the Goths, who fought mightily, but the Hunnic powerful fence overrun them. The Greuthangi were conquered first, and the Tervingi followed. To avoid the Hunnic rule, a large part of the Greuthangi headed west, but many of them remained in their conquered lands. After the land was taken, a very large part of the Tervingi, led by Fritigern and Alaviv, sought refuge inside the Roman Empire. Valens, the Eastern Roman Emperor, agreed to give them shelter inside the empire. The initial plan was that the Goths would be given land to farm in the area of Thrace, and in exchange they would provide soldiers for the empire. Valens also demanded that all the remaining Gothic leaders who were still pagan convert to Christianity. And thus the Goths handed their weapons and started crossing the Danube by the thousands. Their numbers were shocking to the Romans. They were placed in camps nearby the Danube and were told to remain until the fields and lands that were promised to them were ready to be settled. Soon the food became scarce and famine broke out. Some Roman generals took advantage of the situation and sold food at very high prices to the starving Goths. The impoverished Goths were in cases selling their own children in exchange of low-quality food. The Romans kept the Goths in their camps as they either were unable to organize the settling of the large numbers in Thrace or wished to profit from their suffering. Around that time, a huge wave of Greuthangi and Alans, led by Alathius and Saphrax, reached the Roman frontier at the Danube asking for refuge. The Roman Empire could not afford more Goths in its lands, so they refused to let them through, but when the Roman army was distracted, the Greuthangi crossed the Danube with boats and settled not far from the camp of their fellow Goths. The Tervingi, being frustrated with the situation, escaped from their camp and advanced southwards. Lupicinus, one of the Roman generals in charge of the Goths, invited the two Gothic leaders, Fritigern and Alaviv, to a feast in Marcianople. The pretext was that he wished to find a solution of the matter, but in truth he wanted to either capture or kill them. While feasting, the Romans killed the Gothic guards and captured Fritigern and Alaviv. The Goths that were outside the city walls heard the news and began rioting, burning and looting the nearby houses and killing Roman soldiers. Alaviv was killed and Lupicinus released Fritigern to calm down the Goths, but Fritigern joined them in the plunder. The Tervingi were frustrated, enraged and equipped with Roman weapons. As they were becoming dangerous, Lupicinus rushed to meet them on the battlefield, but was defeated. The Tervingi then started pillaging the Thracian countryside in search of food and weapons. Many Romans fortified themselves inside the major cities, while the rest remained at the mercy of the Goths. In the meantime, Gratian, the Roman emperor of the west, was busy fighting Germanic tribes at the Rhine frontier, while Valens was fighting the Persians. The Goths of the Roman army stationed in Adrianople were ordered to march against the Persians, but instead they joined Fritigern. Many slaves also joined the Goths, further strengthening their numbers and expanding their knowledge of the region. The Goths were able to sustain themselves for some time by raiding farms and towns, but without a permanent fertile homeland inside the Roman Empire, they couldn't survive for long. Valens made peace with Persia and sent troops from Armenia to deal with the Goths. Gratian also sent soldiers, but could not afford to send a large army because many refused to go out of fear of new raids in the Rhine. The two Roman armies united at the northeast Balkans. Ricimer became the commander of the now unified Roman armies. A large Gothic wagon lagger was camped south, and bands of Gothic warriors were nearby, searching for food. The Goths learned that the Romans were approaching, so they called all the war bands that were nearby to return to their camp. The Roman army had approximately 5,000 to 6,000 men, mostly infantry and few cavalry. The Goths, on the other hand, had around 7,000 men, again mostly infantry. The wagon lagger served somewhat as a movable wall for the Goths and had women, children, old people and slaves inside. When the Romans decided to attack them, the Goths seized the high ground and waited. Both armies advanced slowly and shouted war cries. Then they started throwing javelins at each other. And when these were through, they attacked each other in a fierce close combat, while the few cavalry units killed anyone who fled from the main battle. Eventually, the Romans were defeated. In the aftermath of the battle, the Romans once again barred themselves inside the fortified cities, while raising barriers to trap the Goths and shut the way to fertile lands and unfortified towns with the intention of starving them. This proved successful for a time, but eventually the Goths, together with some Alans and Huns, broke through and started pillaging the lowlands of Thrace. In the meantime, Valens went to Constantinople. There was a discontent among the people, mainly because he was an Arian Christian, but also because of his failure to control the northeastern border of the empire. He sent a Roman general named Sebastian to engage in guerrilla warfare with the Goths, while he stationed in Adrianople, sending for Gratian to help him. A meeting was held in Adrianople in which Valens and his military commanders discussed whether to attack the Goths immediately or wait for Gratian and his reinforcements. Fritigern sent envoys asking for peace and the original deal that was proposed to them, but the Romans refused. Valens, eager to confront the Goths, enhanced by the flattery of his generals, marched out of Adrianople with approximately 15 to 20,000 men. Fritigern's army numbered around 10,000 men. On the 9th of August 378 AD, the two armies met north of Adrianople on a very hot summer day. The Goths were in front of the wagons and had seized the high ground. The Roman army had to walk several miles under the hot sun until they caught sight of the Goths. The Romans were consisted of the infantry and two cavalry units, accompanied by archers, one on the front left and one on the front right. The Goths were consisted of the infantry that was stationed in front of their wagon camp. As the Romans started advancing towards them, Fritigern sent envoys again to ask for peace. While the negotiations were being held, the Goths, favored by the wind, set the grass that was in front of them on fire, making the situation with the heat even worse for the Romans. The deal that Fritigern offered was that he would provide military aid and supplies if they agreed to the original deal that was struck when they came to the Danube. Valens agreed and proceeded to exchange nobles with the Goths in order to ensure that he would not be cheated. General Ricimer volunteered to go, but while he was approaching the Gothic wagon camp, the accompanying Roman archers and infantry suddenly rushed and attacked the Goths, so the deal was immediately broken. At that moment, thousands of men riding horses descended from the mountains and started cutting down the unsuspecting Romans. These men were the Grothangi Goths, alongside with Alans and Huns that were camped apart from Fritigern's Tervingi but answered his call for help. The two main infantry armies met on the field in a fierce battle. The front left Roman army reached the wagons and pushed back the Goths, but was defeated after the cavalry had deserted them. The Roman army then stood up and confronted the waves of the Goths that were crushing down upon them, but after hours of fighting, the Goths finally overwhelmed them and started cutting down the Roman infantry as it fled in fear. Then followed the remaining Roman cavalry, which was slaughtered as it retreated. Emperor Valens was killed in this battle. According to sources, he was either killed by an arrow or he retreated to a village nearby, which the Goths burned, not knowing that the emperor was there. Many noble Roman generals were killed in the battle. Gratian, frustrated, retreated west. The Goths tried to sack Adrianople and then Constantinople, but did not succeed because of their fortifications, so they started plundering the lowlands of the northeast Balkans. The Goths were free to wander and pillage for 4 years without an army to hold them. Meanwhile, an anti-Gothic sentiment was spreading throughout the empire. Many Gothic Roman soldiers were massacred, others fled their ranks and joined the Goths. The new Eastern Emperor Theodosius gathered soldiers from Syria, Egypt, and tribes from the north to attack the Goths. The Romans drove the Goths west, making them split in small bands again. The Grothangi invaded Pannonia, but were pushed back by Gratian, while the Tervingi counterattacked the Romans and pushed them back all the way to Constantinople. Eventually, in 382, the Goths were given the lands that were promised when they had crossed the Danube.